The letter arrived on a Thursday, wedged between a utility bill and a grocery circular, the kind of ordinary mail that piles up when you live alone. My name was written on the envelope in my wife's handwriting. Evelyn's handwriting. She'd been gone for 14 months. I stood at the mailbox for a long time, the February cold working through my jacket, staring at those letters. The return address was a law firm in Tucson I didn't recognize. My hands weren't steady when I finally opened it. Mr. Alderman, my name is Patricia Rowan. I am an attorney retained by your late wife, Evelyn, approximately 8 months before her passing. She asked me to deliver the enclosed letter to you personally on the 1-year anniversary of her death. Due to a clerical delay in my office, this letter arrives approximately 6 weeks late. I apologize for that. Please call me when you're ready. Inside the outer envelope was a smaller one, cream-colored, sealed. Evelyn had written one word on the front, Hank. Nobody had called me Hank in 14 months. Evelyn was the only one who ever used that name. To everyone else I was Henry, or Dad, or just the old man since I retired from the post office at 63. But to her I'd always been Hank, from the very first week we met at a church potluck in Flagstaff 41 years ago. She'd handed me a paper plate loaded with someone's green bean casserole and said, "You look like a Hank," and I'd said, "My name is Henry," and she'd said, "I know what I said." I went inside and sat at the kitchen table and didn't open it for 2 hours. The house was quieter than it had any right to be. We'd raised our son here, in this 4-bedroom house in Prescott that we'd bought before the neighborhood got expensive. Evelyn had planted the garden out back, the one I still watered, because I couldn't bring myself to let it die. The guest room still smelled faintly of the cedar sachets she kept in the closet. I hadn't changed much of anything since the funeral. People kept suggesting I should. My son kept suggesting it. His wife kept suggesting it more. I finally opened the envelope. Hank, if you're reading this, it means I didn't find the right words while I was still with you. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for a lot of things, but mostly I'm sorry that I have to tell you this in a letter, instead of sitting across the table from you with a cup of coffee, the way we always worked things out. I need you to go to the garage. On the workbench, behind the red toolbox on the left side, there's a gray lockbox I put there about a year ago. The combination is the year we got married, forward and backward. You know which year I mean. Open it alone, Hank. Don't tell our son's wife you found it. Not yet. Maybe not ever, depending on what you decide. I love you. I always have. I'm sorry this is the way you have to find out. You're Evelyn? I sat with that letter for another hour. Then I put on my coat and went to the garage. The gray lockbox was exactly where she'd said it was, behind the red toolbox, pushed back against the wall. I'd probably looked at it 100 times without registering it. I was always bad at noticing things that were right in front of me. Evelyn used to say I could lose my glasses while wearing them, and she wasn't wrong. The combination was 1983, then 3891. The lock clicked open on the first try. Inside was a USB drive, a handwritten note, and a manila folder thick with papers. The note said, "Plug this into the computer in the office. Watch it by yourself. Then read the folder. Then decide what kind of man you want to be. I already know the answer. That's why I married you. I'm not a man who cries easily." I cried standing in that garage in February, alone, holding a note from my dead wife in a house that had gotten too quiet. Then I went inside and plugged in the drive. The video file was labeled simply for Hank. When I clicked it, Evelyn's face filled the screen, and something in my chest broke open in a way I hadn't felt since the morning she died. She looked tired in the video, the way she'd looked in those last hard months, but her eyes were clear, sharp. She'd always had the sharpest eyes of anyone I knew. "Hey, sweetheart." Her voice was steadier than I expected. "I've been practicing this, recorded it 4 times before I got one I could live with. Figured if I was going to say hard things, I should at least say them right." She paused, looked down at something off camera, then back. "I need to tell you about our daughter-in-law." My stomach dropped. "I know you think she's good for our son. I know you think she's made him settle down, made him responsible. And maybe some of that is true. But Hank, there are things she's been doing that I found out about. And I couldn't die without telling you. I just couldn't." She took a long breath. "About 10 months ago. This was just after the diagnosis came back the second time, and we knew it wasn't going to go the way we hoped. I was resting in the bedroom with the door cracked. Our son and his wife were in the kitchen. They thought I was asleep. Hank, they were talking about the house, about what it would sell for, about how the neighborhood had gone up, about what they'd do with their share once." She stopped, pressed her lips together. Once I was gone and you were settled somewhere smaller. I stopped the video, pressed my hands flat against the desk, made myself breathe. Then I pressed play again. I didn't say anything that day. I thought maybe I'd misheard. Maybe it was just the medication making me paranoid the way Dr. Castillo kept warning me about. So I waited. I listened. And I started to notice things I'd been explaining away for years. Evelyn shifted in her chair. The way she steers every family conversation toward money. The questions she asks about your pension, your benefits, the property taxes. The way she talks about assisted living like it's inevitable, like it's just a matter of timing. She asked me once, very sweetly, if we'd thought about what would be easiest for everyone if your health changed. Hank, you're 64 years old and you walk 5 miles a day. Your health is fine. She smiled for a moment, and it was such a real smile, such an Evelyn smile, that I had to look away from the screen. I hired someone, a woman who does private investigations, works mostly family situations. Her name's in the folder. She found things. Bank records that don't match the story we've been told about why they needed to borrow money twice. Text messages. Don't ask me how she got them. She said it's better I don't know. Between our son's wife and her sister, where they talk about you directly. About how long it'll take. About how our son will go along with whatever she decides because he always does. Evelyn's voice didn't waver when she said it, but her hands did. I could see them in her lap, pressing together. Our son doesn't know. I believe that. I believe he loves you, and he loves what he thinks his life is. But he's always been easily led, Hank, and we both know it. We worried about it when he was 15. We shouldn't have stopped worrying. The video ran for another 4 minutes. She told me where everything was in the folder. She told me she'd spoken to a different attorney, not our regular one, specifically to make sure I had options she hadn't told our son's wife about. She told me she'd already made some changes to how things were structured, legally, and that the attorney, Patricia Rowan, could explain the rest. At the very end, she leaned forward toward the camera. You're going to want to give them the benefit of the doubt. That's who you are. You spent 30 years delivering other people's mail, and you never once complained about it because you said the job was about keeping people connected. That's the man I fell in love with. But Hank, protecting yourself isn't the same as being cruel. You can be kind and still keep your eyes open. Promise me you'll keep your eyes open. The video ended. I sat in the office in the dark for a long time. Outside I could hear a car going past, somebody's dog barking 2 houses down, all the ordinary sounds of an evening in a neighborhood where nothing was supposed to be wrong. I want to be fair about what came next. I want to be honest that my first instinct was not to believe it. Evelyn was sick at the end. She was on medication that had real effects on her thinking. Dr. Castillo had warned us about that. She'd had moments in those last months of confusion, of anxiety that didn't match the situation, of fear that seemed to come from nowhere. I loved her for 41 years, but I knew she wasn't infallible. I knew that grief and illness and fear could bend a person's perceptions in ways that felt completely real to them. So, before I did anything else, I read the folder. It took me 3 evenings. There was a lot of it. The private investigator, a woman named Darla Fitch, based out of Phoenix, had put together a report that ran to 47 pages. Bank statements our son and his wife had shared with us showing one picture, and account records from a different source showing another. A series of text messages that made my jaw tighten every time I read a new one. A timeline of every conversation I could remember, annotated with notes Evelyn had made in her own hand in the margins, her small, precise handwriting that I knew as well as my own. One message, sent from our daughter-in-law to her sister 11 months ago, said, "He'll resist at first. They all do. But once she's gone, there's no one to reinforce him. He's softer than he looks, and she's the one with the backbone. 6 months after the funeral, maybe a year, and he'll do whatever makes the tension go away." I read that 3 times. Then I called Patricia Rowan. She was matter-of-fact and kind in equal measure, which I appreciated. She explained what Evelyn had done, adjustments to a specific protective structure she'd asked about, changes to the beneficiary designations on 2 accounts. Nothing had been finalized without Evelyn being of sound and documented mind. Patricia had insisted on 2 independent assessments before completing anything, because Evelyn had told her she knew there might be questions about her mental state later. She thought of everything, I said. She was very organized, Patricia said carefully. She was also very certain. In my experience, when people go to this much trouble for someone they love, they're not usually wrong. I thanked her. I told her I needed time to think. I spent a week just watching. I didn't change my behavior. I answered my son's calls the same way I always did, talked about the weather and the Cardinals, and whether the truck needed new tires. When his wife got on the line, I was warm and ordinary. I gave nothing away. But I was listening differently now. I could hear the shape of what she was doing in a way I hadn't before. The gentle pivots toward my living situation, the little comments about the size of the house, the yard work, the stairs. Always the stairs. She mentioned the stairs in almost every conversation, even though I'd been going up and down those stairs for 20 years without incident. The way she'd say, "We just worry about you," in a tone that managed to sound like love while also implying incompetence. After 2 weeks of listening, I called my old friend from my postal route days. His name's Declan. We'd worked the same sorting station for 11 years, and he'd gone into home security after he retired. I told him I had a situation and needed some equipment. He didn't ask for details, just showed up on a Saturday morning with a bag and spent 2 hours with me going through the house. "These will give you a 30-day loop," he said. "Audio and video. You can pull any of it from your phone." "I feel like I'm in a spy movie," I said. He gave me a look. "You feel like you're protecting yourself." "Different thing. I put cameras in the living room, the kitchen, and my office. Small things, unobtrusive." Then I called my son and said I'd been feeling a little low, and would they come for dinner on Sunday. His wife said, of course, immediately, they'd love to. She sounded pleased in a way that might have just been warmth, or might have been something else. I was learning to sit with not knowing. They arrived at 6. My son looked tired. He always looks tired lately, which I used to attribute to work, to the commute, to just being in your mid-30s with a lot of plates spinning. Watching him walk up the porch steps now, I wondered for the first time how much of that tiredness came from carrying water for someone else's plans. His wife came in behind him, carrying a bottle of wine and a smile that could light up a room. She's always been good at that. Bright, quick, socially fluent in a way I used to think was just her personality. I'm not sure anymore where personality ends and strategy begins. Maybe that's not a fair distinction. Maybe some people just happen to be skilled at things that also serve them. Dinner was pot roast, which I'd made from Evelyn's recipe because I still didn't trust my own. We talked about ordinary things, his commute, her work at the property management company, a trip they were thinking about, maybe the coast, maybe next spring. Over coffee, my son's wife set down her cup and looked at me with an expression I recognized, gentle, concerned, the same expression she'd been working up to for months now. "We wanted to talk to you about something," she said. "We've been going back and forth about bringing it up, but we both feel like we'd be doing you a disservice if we didn't." "Go ahead," I said. She glanced at my son. He nodded, though there was something in the nod that looked more like resignation than agreement. "This house," she said, "is a lot for one person. We know how much it means to you. We know Evelyn loved it. But Hank, the upkeep alone, the yard, the roof, the systems, you're managing all of that by yourself, and our worry is that something's going to catch you off guard. An emergency. A fall." She paused. The stairs are fine," I said. "They are now," she said, in the patient tone people use with children. My son shifted in his chair. "Dad, we're not trying to push you anywhere. We just want to have the conversation." "What kind of conversation?" His wife folded her hands on the table. "There are some really lovely communities in the valley. Active adult, not nursing homes, not anything like that. But people your age, built-in support. No maintenance to worry about. You could sell this house, take the equity, and genuinely be comfortable for the rest of your life without all this." She gestured around, vaguely, as if the house itself was the problem. "We could help manage the sale. Make sure you get the right price, that everything's handled properly." "Both of us," my son added. He looked at his hands. "We just want you to be okay, Dad." I looked at my son for a long moment. He meant it, I think. I believe he genuinely thinks this is care. That's the part that's hardest to hold. "I manage fine," I said. "Of course you do." His wife's voice was very gentle. "But managing fine at 64 doesn't mean you'll manage fine at 74. Don't you think it's better to make these decisions while you're sharp enough to make them well?" "You think I'm not sharp?" "I think you're wonderful," she said, which wasn't an answer. I stood up. "I appreciate the concern, both of you. Why don't we let the evening wind down?" His wife started to say something else, and my son put his hand on her arm, and something passed between them that I couldn't read. They left at 8. I watched them walk to the car from the front window. They sat in the driveway for 11 minutes before they drove away. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. The audio from the driveway came through clearly. "He's not going to move on his own," his wife said. "You know that now, right? We have to stop waiting for him to come around. He's not hurting anything," my son said. "He's fine. He's sitting on $800,000 in equity and a pension he doesn't know how to maximize. He's not fine. He's just comfortable. There's a difference." Silence for a moment. "That's his money," my son said. "It's family money." Her voice was patient in a way that made me understand, suddenly, exactly how many conversations like this had happened before this one. "Your mother's gone. He's alone. 6 months from now, a year, he's going to need help whether he wants to admit it or not. I'd rather we be in position to help properly than scrambling, because we waited too long position to help," my son repeated. He didn't sound convinced. "I love your father," she said. "I'm doing this because I love him." "Yeah," my son said quietly. "Okay." I sat with the recording for a long time. He's not convinced. That was the thing that stayed with me. My son didn't sound like a man executing a plan. He sounded like a man being moved in a direction he hadn't quite chosen. And maybe that changed nothing practically, but it changed something in me. It meant there was still something to reach. I called Patricia Rowan the next morning. "I'm ready to talk about next steps," I said. "Good," she said. "Your wife left very specific instructions for this part too." Over the next 6 weeks, 3 things happened in parallel. First, Patricia and I completed what Evelyn had started. The house was placed in a trust structured so that it could not be sold or transferred without the agreement of 2 independent trustees. A retired judge in Tucson named Garrison Webb, whom Patricia had worked with for years, and my old postal supervisor from the Flagstaff days, a woman named B. Loomis, who'd always had better judgment than anyone else in the building. Upon my death, the house and the bulk of my savings would go to a fund supporting affordable housing for retired postal workers and their families in rural Arizona. It was something Evelyn and I had talked about vaguely for years, one of those someday ideas that never got traction. Patricia said Evelyn had been specific. She wanted the someday to become actual. My son's wife would receive a token amount, $5,000, and a letter, with documentation explaining why. Second, I installed 1 additional camera at the front door, and I waited. They came back 4 more times over those 6 weeks. Each visit was a variation on the same theme, with the volume slowly turned up. The concerned daughter-in-law became gently insistent. The gentle insistence became, during their 4th visit, something that had an edge to it. "Dad, you're being stubborn," my son's wife said, and she said it with such controlled patience that I almost didn't register how different it was from concern. "Maybe," I said. "We're trying to help you. We've been trying to help you for a long time. I know you have." She looked at me for a moment. Then, "There are legal options, you know. If a family is genuinely worried about someone's capacity to make decisions for themselves. It's not something we want, but we have to be honest that it's something we've considered." My son stood up from his chair so fast it scraped the floor. "Whoa. That's not what it's just an option. We are not doing that." His voice had something in it I hadn't heard in years. "Dad, I'm sorry. That's not something we're doing." He looked at me. I looked at him. "Get out of my house," I said. But I was looking at my son when I said it, not at his wife, and I said it quietly without anger. "Please." They left. My son didn't look at his wife on the way out. I stood at the window and watched the car until it turned the corner. Then I called the number Patricia had given me for Garrison Webb, the trustee. "It's time," I said. "I want to confront them directly. What do I need to know first?" He walked me through it methodically. By the time we finished, I had a very clear sense of where I stood. The ground under me was solid in a way it hadn't been in months. I called my son directly that night. "Your dad needs to talk to you," I said, "without your wife. Can you come over Saturday morning?" A pause. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I can do that." He came alone. He sat across from me at the kitchen table where we'd eaten 1,000 meals, and I put a cup of coffee in front of him and sat down. "I need to show you something," I said. I played him the recordings. Not all of them. Enough. His wife's voice, patient and measuring, talking about equity and position and what they'd be in place to do. His own voice, uncertain, going along. He didn't say anything for a long time. "She said she loves you," I said. "She might even believe it. I'm not here to tell you who your wife is, but I need you to hear what she's been doing, and I need you to hear that I already know about it, and that I've taken steps to make sure it doesn't work." I slid a summary from Patricia across the table. The trust structure, the trustees, the beneficiary changes. He read it slowly. "Mom set this up," he said. "Your mother started it. I finished it." He put the paper down. He had the look of a man doing something painful to his vision, trying to see something he'd had just outside his field of view for a long time. "I didn't know," he said, "about the text messages. What she wrote to her sister. I didn't know she was thinking like that. I believe you? Does that matter?" "Yes," I said. "It matters quite a bit." He was quiet for a moment. "What do I do?" "That's not my decision. What your wife did was wrong," I said. "Not criminal, not so far. Just wrong. Manipulative in a way that would have hurt me and might have pushed you into being part of something you didn't fully understand you were part of. What you do with that is between you and her and whatever you can live with. But I need you to know that I see it. I need you to know your mother saw it. And I need you to know that this house and what's in it is going to go where your mother and I decided it should go, regardless of what happens between you and your wife." He nodded slowly. "She's going to be angry," he said. "When she finds out. I imagine so. She's going to say I should have sided with her. She's going to say I let her down. What do you think?" He looked down at his coffee. For a second he looked exactly like the boy he'd been at 15, sitting at this same table trying to work out something that didn't have a clean answer. "I think Mom was right about her," he said. "I think I knew it was off, and I let myself not look at it. Your mother loved you," I said. "She didn't want this to destroy your family. She just wanted me protected. Whatever you build from here is yours to build." He left 2 hours later. He hugged me at the door, which he hadn't done unprompted in years. I stood on the porch and watched him drive away, and felt something complicated and sad, and also somehow intact, like a structure that had been tested and held. His wife called that evening. I let it go to voicemail. The message started with apology and turned into justification inside of 30 seconds, which told me most of what I needed to know. She called twice more over the next week. I let those go too. Her attorney sent a letter suggesting the trust documents might be subject to challenge on grounds of Evelyn's mental capacity at the time of signing. Patricia responded with a 12-page letter detailing the 2 independent assessments, the documentation trail, and the specific reasons every procedural safeguard had been observed. The attorney did not write back. I didn't hear from my son's wife directly after that. My son called about 3 weeks later. He sounded tired in a different way than before. Something resolved rather than deferred. He said he and his wife were going to counseling. He said he'd told her directly that he wouldn't be part of pressuring me, and that she needed to understand that without negotiation. He said it had not gone well at first. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I will be," he said. "Dad, I'm sorry for not seeing it, for going along with things I should have asked harder questions about. You're asking them now," I said. "I should have asked them sooner." "Probably," I said. "But here we are." He laughed a little at that, the way he used to laugh when he was a kid and I'd said something dry. The sound of it was good to hear. Spring came late that year, the way it sometimes does in Arizona, cold holding on past when you expect it to release. I was out in the garden in March, working on the beds Evelyn had planted, doing it wrong, probably, but trying, when my neighbor's boy came over the fence to ask if I needed help. His name is Milo, 14 years old, quiet, the kind of kid who watches everything before he speaks. He'd helped me with yard work the previous fall when I threw out my back, and I'd paid him enough that his mother had called to say it was too much. "You look like you're fighting the soil," he said, which was accurate. "The soil's winning," I said. He came in through the gate, and we worked together for 2 hours. He knew more about gardening than I did, which turned out to be because his grandmother had kept a garden in West Texas, and he'd spent summers with her until she got too sick. We talked about her while we worked, her name, her stubbornness, the way she'd kept growing things even when her hands didn't cooperate. "She sounds like a hard person to lose," I said. "Yeah," he said. "She was the one who made sense of things." I understood that precisely. When we finished, I paid him and he tried to say it was too much again, and I told him it wasn't negotiable. He went home with dirt on his knees, and I stood in Evelyn's garden and looked at what we'd managed to put right together. That evening I went through the camcorder again. I'd been doing this sometimes, on quiet evenings, finding the recordings Evelyn had made just to talk. There was one I'd missed, shorter than the others, maybe 2 minutes, taken from what looked like the hospital room in the last days. She looked frail. She always looked frail toward the end, but here she looked pared down to just herself, just the essential thing she'd always been. "Hank," she said, I know you're going to handle all of it. I know you're going to be all right. But I want to say something that isn't about Jessica or the house or any of that." She stopped, looked at the window for a second. "I want to say that being loved by you was the best thing that happened to me. For 41 years, you just kept showing up. You weren't flashy about it. You didn't make speeches. You just kept showing up. And that turned out to be everything." She looked back at the camera. "Keep showing up, okay? Keep going to the garden. Keep walking. Keep talking to people. Don't let the quiet get too loud." She smiled. "I'll be listening." I watched that 4 times. Then I went and called my son just to hear his voice. The trust funded its first housing assistance grants in September. A family in Winslow, a retired letter carrier named Dwight and his wife, both in their 70s, was able to stay in their home after a roof emergency that would have otherwise forced them to sell. I heard about it from Garrison Webb, who sent me a brief note along with a photo someone had taken of Dwight's wife, standing in their front yard, looking up at the new roof. She had the expression of someone who'd been given back something they'd thought was gone. I put the photo on the refrigerator, next to the one of Evelyn at the Grand Canyon. From the summer, we drove across the state for our 30th anniversary, the one where she was laughing at something I'd said, her face turned toward the camera at the last second. I look at both of them most mornings. My son comes to dinner on Sundays now, when things are steady between him and his wife. We don't talk about what happened. We talk about his work, about the garden, about whatever game was on the night before. Slowly, carefully, we are building something that feels like it might hold. His wife came once, 2 months after the counseling started. We sat in the living room and she said she was sorry in a way that seemed like she was trying to mean it. I thanked her. I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't okay, and she was smart enough to know I knew that. But I didn't close the door either. People are more than the worst thing they've done, most of the time. I have to believe that, or I'll become someone I don't want to be. I'm 65 now. The house is mine, and it's going where Evelyn and I decided it should go. The garden comes back a little more every spring. Milo still comes over sometimes to help, and I'm teaching him what little I know, which isn't much but is something. Last week I walked my 5 miles in the early morning, the air cold and clean, and smelling of desert after rain, and I thought about what Evelyn had said in the garage video. "You have at least 20 good years." She'd said it to make a point about Jessica. She'd been talking about the house. But I think she also meant it plain. 20 years is a long time, long enough to get the garden right, long enough to see what my son builds, long enough to watch more families stay in their homes who thought they'd have to leave. I got home and sat on the porch with coffee and watched the neighborhood wake up. Same street I'd walked for 20 years. Same sky, different eyes. Evelyn was right about that too. She was right about most things. That was just who she was. I'm still showing up. I intend to keep doing it.